Hello and welcome to day 167 of a screenwriter's journey. I just have to tell you, this is nothing to do with the script. Right now, I'm printing a 3D kind of laser cut thing in my basement on my 3D printer. I'm rendering this spinning top animation that one of my sons made, these cool geonodes, as they're called, in Blender right now. And then when I get done with that, I'm going to composite it in After Effects with a clock that I made with a tutorial from Default Cube. All credit to him on YouTube. So I'm a multitasking fool, and I've spent about an hour and a half today writing, and this is my third voiceover, and it's not even 5:30. So that just shows you how great I am and how humble. All right. That was a complete waste of 1 minute and 3 seconds. But this is a pretty long day, so let's see if I can get caught up here. I wonder what the hell. So Hogan, Holly, and crew, Luke and Abby, are talking. I realized, gosh, I've just got a lot of dialogue. I guess I had said early on that one of my goals was to simplify the story. And usually simpler stories have less dialogue. That's not necessarily true. I mean, it could be a simple love story and you could have a lot of talking back and forth, just not a lot of plot per se. And, you know, most action films don't have a ton of dialogue. They have more fights or whatever it is. Travels, you know, some of those movies like The Hobbits where they just have sort of a montage or a series of shots or whatever you want to call it when they're hiking through and they're going from here to there. And but for what this is, which was supposed to be a relatively simple kind of thriller, it's not really a thriller. I don't even know how I would genreize this. But it's got a lot of dialogue, and I was writing some more today, and it was what I referred to, of course, as virgin dialogue. And man, now that I look at this and look at what I was writing today, it's just so much talking. I'm getting to the point where the quote bad guy, bad gal, not to give anything away, sort of, you know, spills the beans and says what's going on, or her perception of what's going on. And usually when I write that for the first time, it all comes out in a big long string with a couple of, you know, you break it up with a pause or a beat or some minor action. But it's basically getting the story out on the page. And then when you go back and rewrite it, then you can, you know, add some action. They're walking, they're driving in a car, they're on motorcycles, they're fighting, they're swimming for their lives. You know, something is going on, so it's just not a big dialogue dump, which it is now. And I say that because what I'm writing today, as in, you know, January 8th, part 2, and I haven't renamed that yet. It just seems like a lot of dialogue here too. And so most of this I've been over, so I'm just looking at here. So this gave out Hogan's backstory, basically. Grim expressions. What do we do now? Holly stands. We don't do anything. So even though you can see stuff underneath that, oh my gosh, the stuff underneath that is from the original script, I think, or the original version, because Jake and Abby aren't together anymore as they were. I shouldn't say they aren't together. They never were together as a couple, but they are, you know, how they got paired off. But anyways, the point is I'm doing a bunch of virgin writing here, which means A, probably way more dialogue than I need, as I have just explained, and B, there's going to be a lot of changes, and C, I won't say I don't know where I'm going, but I have this bad habit, as you know, of not outlining, not index carding, not plotting enough, at least on paper or cyber paper, whatever, more in my head. And I've just always done that. And obviously it has not paid off in terms of commercial success, but it sure is fun sometimes just to write, just the storytelling. I guess the idea is the imagination. And then, you learn structure along the way. You learn hopefully dialogue along the way, character development, all that kind of stuff. But it all starts with an idea, and my MO seems to be to gather my ideas in my head, write them somewhat down as best as I can do it, or I can stand before I have to write, and then I start writing. I've said this many, many times in the past 166 days, and do you expect something to change on 167? No, you shouldn't. All right, so now we've got this long, well, relatively long flashback. And again, this is, I hate to say it, this is sort of me getting it out and deciding, does it deserve a flashback? Does it need a flashback? Do we tell it in just exposition, or don't we tell it at all? Isn't it necessary? Obviously, you don't need to see every single thing. I touched on that several days ago, of how much do you have to explain? Do you have to make everything perfectly rational, and do you have to lay it out and really spoon feed the audience so there's absolutely no question of what went on in a scene when you weren't there? What were the characters doing when you were away at another scene? And when you think about that, it's really interesting, because a good movie, when they're doing parallel cutting near the end, which is sort of a classic thing that you do, you start people together, you bring them apart, they go about their separate journeys or whatever they're doing, and then you bring them together at the end. I mean, think of how typical that is for really any movie, unless you're just following one person, which, in 1917, a very rare case. But at any rate, the thing about the parallel scenes is, if it's done well, you may have three scenes that are, quote, taking place at the same time, and you're just getting glimpses of each. Yet when you come back to the first scene, after you've seen the first, second, and third, and now you're cycling back to the first, it might be 30 seconds, it might be 2 minutes have passed, but what you're seeing makes total logical sense because it's been structured right. As opposed to, you cut to a scene, you show what's going on for a minute and a half, 2 pages or whatever. You come to the next scene, you show it starting at that same point that the previous scene started in, and then you go to the third scene, or however many you have, and you're seeing that same period of time from three different points of view, if you will. And there are certainly films that do that, and there's good reasons that they do that. I would say more often you're always moving ahead in time, unless you're Christopher Nolan, then who knows where you're moving in time. But I don't know that probably in limited things, you're basically, you're flashing back, but it's not a flashback per se. I don't really know how that would work, because I don't know how that would work, if you would even have to denote that, because if you're going from scene A to scene B, people are going to assume that scene B is picking up time-wise where scene A left off, as opposed to going back to when scene A started. Again, it really depends what the story is and if you have a need to do that. But when you think about that, it's kind of interesting. Once again, I literally have not looked at the script for the last 4 minutes because I've been talking about that, and I have no idea if this is of any interest to people. The farther I go into this journey and I see how many views I'm getting on YouTube, which is basically 2 a day as an average, maybe 3. I'd have to go back and look. And I have a sinking feeling that because this is just a script, it's a no one, nobody, nothing script. At this point, people may watch for 30 seconds, or they may have not realized they clicked on it, and then they go to what they meant to click on. So I haven't looked in my analytics, and maybe they don't even track it with this few views, what the average duration that people are spending watching this. And I would be curious to know, yet I would really be apprehensive to find out, but that's no reason not to go and look. I probably should. Probably is the key word there. So they're trying to figure out, and again, I'm kind of fleshing this out. They see the airplane, or the helicopter imprints, and they see the footprints. And I don't want to get into that, Indian scout or Western scout who's trying to figure out by how deep the imprints are, or some super CSI. They wouldn't really be CSI because there's no science to it. But it is a crime scene in a way. So I don't want to get too far into that, but there's got to be enough clues. They can't just magically, whoa, we figured it all out, and then they jump on the bandwagon and off they go to the next scene. So there is that fine line where, again, you don't want to have to stop and explain everything, but you have to give the audience enough crumbs, if you want to use that analogy, that, the cookie is out there someplace and we're finding breadcrumbs. I guess that's Hansel and Gretel. That was me resting my voice. I told the guy I have them watching to call if anything. Holy crap, a phone buzzer. Does he say holy crap at a phone buzz, Luke? That's kind of weak. Flash of panic uses another home buzzer with my dad. Oh, gosh. So here's another way to bring Hogan's backstory into the story. I was thinking, well, his parents have retired or taking it easy. He's running day to day, but they live like 20 minutes away. And so because they live relatively close, if a helicopter was going in the direction and if it passed by, they would have a general idea of where the copter was heading. And I literally can't believe I wrote this. It's so, it's not horrible, I don't think, my objective opinion, but what was I thinking that I would include? Basically, look at all of that Hogan at the bottom of 68. Including the pauses, he's got like 10 or 12 lines of dialogue. And it's for a character we're never going to meet. And of course, the payoff is slated to be in my head that Hogan's dad calls back and says, yeah, we just saw a helicopter passing overhead, so you can hop in your car and you know which way they're going, which would be totally stupid. So, gosh, a lot of this is just, it's bad, but it's not unusually bad, or it's not unusual to have bad. And again, it's not bad. I'm just saying, why did I waste my time writing this? And now let me answer my own question. It's because that's the way I work through stuff. I've said this before, but it's really hard for me to imagine someone just sitting at their computer, or maybe they're doing it on notes, old-fashioned note cards, probably not, or they've got a little audio recorder, their phone or something, and they're just plotting out their whole movie that way. I just don't know how that works. I don't know how you get the nuances and all that. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Just like the other thing that just, and I've got to repeat this again because it's just incredible. It's literally, the topic is the old days of typewriters, which was basically up until 83, 82. The last job I had in Hollywood, the first and last job, a temporary job at a typing service where networks and production companies would drop off their scripts, and then myself and whoever else worked there, 20 or 30 people, would just have a IBM Selectric typewriter, and we would retype a script after all the handwritten notes and everything, and we had to make it look clean, and it could only have so many typos, and I didn't do so hot on that. I was a good fast typist, but I think they had a final proofer, and then he or she would have to go in and make the final thing. And anyways, the point is, that's how they used to do it. And I mean, when you see all the, and it's not just me, of course, everybody writing on a word processor, when you see how many word processing software, I should say, when you see how many changes I make, you make, we all make, it's just, I don't know. I literally don't know if I used to just sit there and think a lot more. Because look at this. I mean, I got to delete all that. So if I did that on a typewriter, I would pull the piece of paper out. I would put a big X over it, and then I would say like restart here or something. But then your script is worthless at that point in terms of pagination, because it's all screwed up. And so there were times I would literally cut with scissors or a paper cutter or whatever, and put it together and sort of make maybe a very, very rough draft. But then still, gosh, then you got to go back and type the whole thing over, and you got to do it right. Of course, at that point, if you make mistakes, you just use the little correcto ball or the whiteout. But it's just unbelievable. I guess we putting myself in the pool of screenwriters must have been a lot more disciplined. It's sort of like, I started editing film, Super 8, and then I did 16, and I was one of the editors on my senior film at USC, and I was one of the guys who had to do the cut, what is it called, the master, the reverse, the final cut. I forgot what it was called. The answer print? No, you had the answer print. But anyways, myself and two other people, I think, did the final actual splicing, and then, putting it on the moviola and all that. And at that point, we had something to reference, obviously. The director wasn't standing there telling us what to do. There were markings. And so that sort of thing, I mean, that's literally cutting frames. And I do remember shooting both 16 and Super 8 movies when you would literally, some sort of a moviola. It may have been a homemade one, not homemade, but a store-bought one that I did for Super 8. And you would just watch it, you would reel it by hand. I sound like an old timer. And then you would make the cut, and then you would splice it together. When you're going through dailies, you would cut a scene literally, and you would hang the strips. Anyone who knows or appreciates old editing techniques have seen those moviolas, the bays, where they would just hang strips of film up, and you would label them, scene 1A, scene 1B, if you had like coverage and you had close-ups and stuff like that. And then you would put them together with tape. I think they used cement for maybe a 16 and 35 millimeter, with some sort of a quick dry cement, not cement, but clear cement. I can't remember if that's what happened, because Super 8 was always little self-adhesive, basically Scotch tape, except clearer than that. And you could still see it when it went through the projector, and it would, of course, jump and all that. But when I think of cutting films like that compared to how we do it now, and then the same way with writing, it's just literally a different era. I would think the difference in that is even bigger than like moving from no talking to talking. I don't know, just talking out loud, speaking of talking. But it's absolutely unbelievable to think back. Well, it has been a few years now, to how I used to have to do it. It's just unbelievable. And so I've talked for another 6 minutes about the olden days. And hopefully you've been listening to me while watching this super exciting. I should watch one of these backs where I go off, watch one of these back when I go off onto those tangents. And then I just keep typing, obviously. So this, yeah, I mean, this is virgin writing. And I guess one of the reasons I'm going off on tangents is, here's another spoiler alert. This probably will end up changing greatly. So they're doing, again, it's just kind of getting to know these characters, in this case, Ace, who talks more than Clyde to some extent. And then just seeing how much I want them to say, how disgusting I want them to be. Obviously, that part about throwing a half hour with you and I'll work pro bono. Did I think I was really going to use that? Probably not. If I would have never written it, would have I been happier? Would have the script been better? Or by writing it, did I say, well, that's something I don't want to do? I guess that's sort of my MO, is to write too much, get rid of it. You know, I'm not going to beat myself up because I did that. And I'm not going to say, oh, Jack, you wasted a lot of time. Why did you write that scene like that? I can't imagine that any writers would beat themselves up over something like that. But it is, I just can't get that whole editing craziness out of my mind. It would definitely call for more discipline. You had less chances to try options. I'm talking about movie editing. Obviously, writing editing is something the same. But back to this scene on 71, this is definitely going on a little bit too long. So now Ace has got a little girl. And then, so they're getting into all this stuff, which even if it does belong, these are not the characters who should be delivering this dialogue and talking to Rachel about this. And one problem that I do see myself having, I don't know, I mean, in particular this script, but I'm sure if I looked, I do it in other scripts, and I've mentioned it before, is having like main characters talk to just not throwaway characters, but non-main characters about super important stuff. And in the present day, I'm writing these scenes with Rachel. Well, it's Rachel and Lexi and Jake. So they're not non-essential characters, but it's sort of confrontation-ish. It's like the final thing. And Rachel and Holly, in my mind, should be having it. But at this point, they're not. But in the previous version, when they were in the airport, Holly and Rachel shared screen time, if you want to call it that, for maybe 2 minutes, 3, 4 minutes, 5 at the most. And they have that confrontation. And then there's that fight scene. But it really, I mean, it's not a superhero knockdown, drag them out. So that's something I kind of struggle with, of how to get them back together, because the nature of the script is they're not. So that is, I see myself coming to the end of this day. Whoops, I fell asleep briefly there. You can see by all those K. It's like a lot of strikeouts. So this has been a long day, another lot of tangential talking, hopefully some of it interesting about the old days, maybe not. See you tomorrow, Screenwriter's Journey.